What is up, Outlap F1 Nation? This will be season 6, episode number 45 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2024 Viva Las Vegas GP review show. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. And we're actually almost a full day, 24 hours removed from the early morning dawn of the Las Vegas GP. Apparently we both were watching it live. I didn't realize you were still up along with me. Otherwise I'd have texted you a couple times. But how'd you find it, and how you hanging today?
Made it to the end. I even stayed up to watch all the post-race celebrations. The podium here in Las Vegas takes a little longer than the other podiums. And there were some championship awarded interviews that were going on too, so I stayed up to watch all that. So yeah, I made it all the way through, and then I hit the bed like a rock.
Yeah, I think Ted's notebook started, and I don't remember anything of that. I think he said hello everybody, and that's all I remember, because then it was out curtains for me. It was a very fun, interesting Las Vegas GP weekend. We've crowned a champion. If you didn't know, congrats to Max Verstappen on securing his 4th consecutive World Drivers' Championship. We're going to get into all of that and how he managed to do it in just a little bit. But if you have found our show, as David Croft, who was there and was broadcasting on ESPN, would say, welcome along. You can find our show, as always, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and, of course, YouTube. At Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. If you enjoy what you're seeing and you like what you're hearing, you can do as the kids do and smash that subscribe button, or you can leave us a like. Or if you're on your favorite podcasting app, if you're just listening to the audio, if you want to leave us a 5-star review, what does that all do? It just helps us come up a little bit better in F1-related search results, helps us get our content to you, if you enjoy it, that much quicker. You can email the show, as always, chatnow@outlapf1.com, or you can send us a DM on all or any of the social media platforms that we're on. Thank you so much to the people who do continue to support the show, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and, of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to help out the show in any way you'd like, with a couple bucks, $1, $5, we would be most grateful. You can see our link in our show notes. It's our anchor page. All goes into trying to upgrade equipment, keep equipment that we have relevant, enable us to do all sorts of fun stuff. So we would be most grateful if you'd like to do that. Lastly, before we hop into the bit of breaking news that happened over the weekend, which was pretty massive when you think about it, but the good folks at Manscaped, since Christmas is just around the corner, it's going to be Thanksgiving in the U.S. Later on this week as we gear up for Qatar, but that means Christmas is right around the corner. So if you're looking to secure a deal, you can use our code OUTLAP, OUTLAP, all one word, and that will get you 20% off and free shipping on your order from those folks at Manscaped. All right, so we're just going to hop right into the breaking news. We talked about this a little bit in our preview, but I don't think we quite had the timing quite right. Apparently this is going to happen now, as in right now. The Andretti bid is now set to be approved with a significant name change to the entry. It is, I had this confirmed by someone actually in the paddock, Chris Medland, who was gracious enough to answer my direct question about this because I wanted to make sure I got it right. This is the Andretti bid with the Andretti staff and the Andretti facilities. However, it will not be branded with the Andretti Global logo or name on the entry. It is expected to be called Cadillac F1. Will be powered by Ferrari engines until 2028. So this is tentatively going to be approved, hasn't officially been approved, but it's going to be approved for 2026 entry. They'll use Ferrari power units until 2028, and at that point they will switch over to their own independent GM branded and manufactured power unit. We're going to get our 11th team on the grid after all. You take the guys that were like oil and water out of the equation, you throw in a little bit of a Department of Justice investigation in the paddock, and suddenly everybody's friends with one another. Wow, look at that. Cody, what's your reaction to this? Did not have this one on my bingo card going into the weekend for sure.
I definitely didn't either. It's a great thing. Yeah, I think it's what most fans wanted to see happen. It does suck that it's not going to see, in all likelihood, the Andretti branding because they are the ones who made this happen. And it does also suck that, as you said, we needed to get certain people out of the equation, it seems, to actually get the deal done and in paper. But it is going to be very exciting. It is very exciting that GM is going to have their own engine in this in a few years. It's awesome that the team is going to be, it looks like they're going to be in the championship right from the start of the new regulations. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. More cars on the grid to me is more exciting. We're going to have more American representation on the grid beyond Haas. And it does kind of seem a little weird to me that it's not going to have apparently any Andretti branding. F1 doesn't seem to have any issues with Haas branding for their team. But I digress. No matter what, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they got there, and I guess I don't have to really care how they got there, but the fact is they got there. There's a little part there where we get to awards. I'll talk about some of the pettiness and how that kind of devolved into where we got to, but I don't particularly like that aspect of it. But I like the fact that finally rationality finally has supposedly invaded the paddock, invaded the team's mindset, that they realize that, hey, if there's a big mark that wants to come in, you might want to let them in because, one, it's more cars on the grid, which is always helpful, and two, we've had some major defections in terms of OEMs and power units, especially with these new regs coming in. So this gets one back into the win column, and I think that ultimately is probably what convinces the teams and convinces Liberty, and I mean the FIA had already stamped approval, but it convinces all of those stakeholders to say, wait a minute, what are we doing? Why are we keeping these guys out when the even current marks that are in the sport are folding and going away? So I'm happy we got there, and that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to say, I guess I'm happy we get there. And as we learn more detail, obviously at this point we have not heard about who the potential drivers would be, or how the team, or who's going to run the team, or any of that stuff. So as that continues to come and when this gets made official, obviously stay tuned to our social media. We will try to bring all of that to you as we learn it. Okay, so turning into the Las Vegas GP weekend, for the on-track stuff, we shall start with our headlines of the day. Cody, what you got here?
It's Mercedes with the steel chair. They come out of nowhere, and they've done this several times this year, where they go weeks and weeks and weeks, are the fourth fastest car, Lewis Hamilton going out in Q1, all that craziness, and then every once in a while you get a little glimpse of what could be. Mercedes was dominant this weekend, both in qualifying from George Russell and during the race, and it was all apparent from practice, and me and you were sitting there looking at our predictions going, oh no. So, great job to Mercedes this weekend. It was definitely an unexpected dominant performance. You can definitely tell where the team's frustration comes from with their car, because we get glimpses of it, as I said, like this weekend, where we know that that car can be great and the fastest on its day. But conditions that it takes to get the car there are so narrow that I would be surprised if we saw this happen in the last two races.
Yeah, fully agree. My headline is kind of around the same way yours is, and that's Mercedes took a spin at the slot machines in Las Vegas, and whatever setup they brought came up 777s across the way, and the machine was dinging and spitting out coin or money or speed or downforce or tire temp or whatever it was needed. They got it. They had it, and they had it in spades this weekend. So congrats to them. Lewis Hamilton, even messing up in qualifying, didn't manage to hinder him. He slices through the field like the Lewis of old and makes everybody else around him look pretty darn slow, including Max Verstappen, who, with some help, with a Dremel tool, which we're going to talk about, that was a new one, did secure his spot amongst the greats in the sport over the course of this weekend. So full congrats to Max again for securing the Drivers' Championship. But yeah, just we're going to get into all of this. Definitely crazy mixed up grid. Not the craziest mixed up race that we got kind of last year, but it was still pretty darn good. We saw some good overtakes according to all that, and we're going to hop into that. We will start, as we are always apt to do, with the qualifying recap. And I have it. Why does it do this? Why does it go away from where I have it? I literally had this all set up where I'm like, oh, I'm going to click it. But all right, here we go. Here comes the quality recap sound. All right. So, going out in Q1, in P20, the first he had himself an interesting FP2, FP3. He was lucky to get out even to turn a lap. You didn't think he was even going to make it. That was Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin. P19 was Valtteri Bottas. P18 was Alex Albon. P17 was Fernando Alonso. P16, ouch, war pain yet again, Sergio Perez in the Red Bull out in Q1. That's the Q1 monster grabbing one of the heavy hitters here. P15 was Liam Lawson. P14, Franco Colapinto, despite a crash, which we'll talk about. P13 was Zhao Guanyu. P12 was Kevin Magnussen. P11, Esteban Ocon. The top 10 from 10 to 1. P10 looked like he was on for pole, made a mistake in the first turn. That ruined his lap. That was Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. P9, Nico Hulkenberg, Haas Ferrari, kicking back a bit against their rival in the battle for P6 in the Constructors. P8, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. We'll have to talk about where their pace went between FP3 and qualifying. P7, Yuki Tsunoda in the V-Carb. So V-Carb showing some surprising pace here. P6 was Lando Norris. That was all he could muster in terms of getting near the front this weekend. P5 was Max Verstappen. So championship drivers, Max, first blood on the weekend to him. P4 was Charles Leclerc. P3, the shocker of qualifying for me. Maybe it's not so shocking anymore. Maybe we should start to really pay attention to what these guys are doing. But Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, since the Coda upgrades have hit, Alpine in one lap pace has been pretty darn good. Manages to get into the third spot. P2, Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. That was expected. I think we all thought Ferrari was going to be pretty dominant here. At least in qualifying, it certainly looked that way. But P1, again, did not see this one coming. George Russell in the Mercedes by almost a full tenth on pole position with a 1:32.312. All right. Cody, big takeaways from the qualifying session.
Lots of good ones here. First one, the obvious one, Mercedes pace from practice turned into the real deal in qualifying. I thought we were going to see potentially a 1-2 from Mercedes in qualifying and locking out the front row. Russell did his part. Unfortunately, as you said, Lewis did make that mistake, and so he ended up at the back of Q3. Ended up needing to cut his way through the field in the race. It does kind of make you wonder what could have been had he not made that mistake and did lock out the front row. I think we could have seen a really, really good battle between the two of them, as we're going to get into. We almost maybe could have seen the battle between the two of them, despite. I did cringe really hard when Franco Colapinto had that accident because, man, Williams cannot catch a break. They had so much rebuilding and are up against the budget cap with how many times they've had to rebuild their cars. They managed to get everything in order during the 3-week break for this race, and then the car was destroyed again in qualifying. They had a great camera shot of one of the team members for Williams in slow-mo where he's just kind of doing this and being like, oh, God. And felt his pain in that moment. They somehow managed to get it ready again for the race, but I don't know how many more times they can do that. It's a good thing for them that there's only 2 races left because they gotta fill up the bank again.
Yeah, I mean the Williams mechanics. I think if there is an award that is given to a mechanic, you have to give it to these guys. They have rebuilt that car between Logan Sargent and Franco Calapinto now so many times. One, I think they're really good at it. They must obviously know how to do the whole salvage bit, but for a team that you were you just wanted to say, just get through this weekend. Don't hit the car. I don't care if you don't score any points, but we got to get to the end of this thing. It's the one team that you didn't want to see any bad stuff happen to, and there it was. And it was just a small overcorrection. And the Vegas circuit is such that if you make a small overcorrection in the wrong spot, there's the wall, and that's what did it for him. And you heard the first bang, and then you watch the car go all the way across the track, and then the second bang, which is just, if not worse than the first one. Yeah, your heart just goes out to all of those mechanics who had worked so hard and so tirelessly. And then there's the shot of James Vowles, who just does this long blink, on purpose, closing and reopening of his eyes. Like, if he could be anywhere else in the universe, I think he would have preferred to have been somewhere else in that moment. But yeah. And I don't know that this is anything. It was clear to me that making the Sargent move when they did was the right thing to do, because that had kind of gotten out of hand. But and Franco, I think, is going to show more raw talent, and they're still trying to figure out ways to get him either into the sport or back into the sport after, if next year doesn't work out for him. But damn, you really have one job: keep the car together, and you can't do that, and that's just not a good look all the way around. Yikes.
He's got plenty of talent. We've seen it over some of the successes he's had since filling in for Logan Sargent. And I think he's going to have a successful career. He's going to get into a car somewhere. But yeah, it's some rookie mistakes. And a lot of drivers had mistakes this weekend. They were complaining that due to the cold weather and the amount that the tires needed to be inflated to combat those cold temperatures, some of the drivers were describing it as feeling like you were driving in the wet. So understandable for the mistake to be made, but as you said, it was the one team we didn't want to see have that problem. The big surprise from this, Pierre Gasly must have had like a big hearty breakfast or something that morning, because he was on it and ready. I was not prepared for him to jump to the top of the timing sheet right there at the end. I was like sitting there going, holy crap, they're going to do it again. Or at least Gasly was. Unfortunately, Ocon did not have the qualifying to match this time out, but it was still very exciting to see, especially now that they're running the all pink car here. Good to see that up front. I think it's a little bit more fun than the blue pink kind of cotton candy looking thing they had going before. So.
Yeah, and the big part about Gasly's final lap, and you don't usually see this, and it's just a testament to how far the track had to go from where it started to where it finished. The track was still ramping up. So you wanted to be the last or the second to last or near the end of that Q3 session. And I don't know if he got a toe or what it was, but Pierre Gasly in the straight line going down the strip, I think he put together 4 or 5 consecutive purple sectors at the end of Q3 in the third sector, purple mini sectors. So whatever it was, he closed the show, and that thing was at full blast, nothing hanging out, managed to get it stopped and kept it on track. So yeah, fair play, man. That was, I don't know if he just had, I don't know what went to a buffet in Vegas and gave him super vitamin shots or what, but whatever it was, man, he certainly brought the goods. yeah, I mean, we talked about a lot about George Russell already. You know, the Mercedes dominance. It easily and could have easily been a Mercedes 1-2. They were clearly the quickest throughout all of the practices. They were clearly the quickest once we got to qualifying, and you just had to sit back and go, I don't think anybody's going to touch these guys, and nobody really did. Um, you know, in terms of, you know, the Lando Max thing, again, this was kind of first blood to Max. Max and Red Bull kind of had some struggles early in the practice sessions, but definitely started to rally when it came for game time. And one of those things, and the story, whether or not it's a rumor or I don't think there's truth to it, but the story that had burbled up was that somehow Red Bull had brought the wrong rear wing. And I don't think that was the case at all. I think they brought a model of rear wing that they took a look at and saw what everybody else did and went, maybe we hadn't gone low downforce enough. And it got so actually extreme that I think it was between FP2 and FP3, they literally took a Dremel tool and shaved part of the rear wing off to lower the downforce just a little bit more. And whether that ended up helping or whatever, one, you always got to remember the max factor of all this. You know, maybe the car's not its best, but he's worth a good chunk just on his own. And I think that's kind of what you saw here, because his teammate is down in 16th, and top level trolling by the Las Vegas Sphere after Q1. To literally see a big picture of Sergio Perez giving himself the thumbs down is top level stuff, man. I don't know if you caught it, but during the break between Q1 and Q2, they had all 20 drivers do a celebration, like, yeah. And then they do the same thing in Formula E, where they've got like the yeah celebration. They've got the oh man celebration. This was Sergio Perez, and he literally, his take on it was to give him a thumbs down. And so you see, big thing. The scoreboard says who's eliminated, and it says P16 Perez, and he's giving himself the thumbs down. I couldn't have written it any better, but more and more pain, it seems, for Sergio Perez in the other Red Bull.
Talk about a kick in the teeth there. As far as the Red Bull car goes, yes, it wasn't that they literally brought the wrong wing. They didn't have a wing that was low enough downforce. Apparently, they haven't developed one. They didn't see a need to develop such a low downforce rear wing, because the amount of times that they would need it during the season are relatively few and far between, you know, like maybe Monza and here. And we actually saw a similar thing with this this kind of weirdly shaped rear wing at least one other track. It might have been Monza. But yeah, it looks a little goofy with how they just literally cut slots in the rear wing to make it happen. But it got Max up to 5th place, and that's all that they really needed. If they're saving a few bucks within the budget cap by just like, you know, taking the scissors to the rear wing every now and again when they need to, gets it done.
Yeah, and they're not going to, any of the rear wings I think you saw here are not going to be used in the last 2 races. So you kind of didn't need to save it for saving its sake. So yeah, take the Dremel tool and chop it off, and I guess that works for you. And if it still meets all the regs, it's good to go in my book as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, good ingenuity by, I think, the Red Bull team to help Max do some rallying there after looking a little suspect in the qualifying. All right, so we had our grid set up. The only post-qualifying penalty was, ironically enough, Valtteri Bottas took, I think, a 10-place grid penalty, and then Lance Stroll actually did get promoted up a little bit, and then Franco Colapinto started from the pit lane, so he surrenders his P14 spot after the wreck in Q2. He was declared fit to race. I think the Williams statement that put out that said he had a 50G impact, so mandatory medical yeah, I mean, it was just icky all the way around. You weren't sure if he was okay, but, you know, fortunately he was all checked out, all declared fit and good to race, and he would do so. All right, so we will turn the page over, and we will get into the race, and we shall start, as we are always apt to do, with the back markers and your non-classified finishers. Unfortunately, the great qualifying did not translate into a good race finish for these guys. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine is the first non-finisher of the race, going out with a suspected engine failure. Did manage to bring it back to the pits, but you saw the blue smoke, and that's never a good sign. Your other non-classified finisher was Alex Albon in the Williams, suffering also a mechanical failure as well, forced to retire the car after 25 laps. P18, Valtteri Bottas in the Hick Sauber. P17, Esteban Ocon in the other Alpine, so no help for Alpine in their quest for sixth in the constructors. P16 was Liam Lawson. P15 was Lance Stroll, so a bit of a rally there. P14, coming from the back of that pit lane start to a respectable finish here, that was Franco Colapinto in the Williams. And P13, look at that, Zhou Guanyu in the Kick Sauber. Almost out of our back markers, Cody. Look at that.
Yeah, it was a pretty amazing performance from Zhou Guanyu. He was actually running in the points during some parts of the race, and I thought, oh my God, it would be so good to see him just get 1 point for the team this year, since we know that he's not going to be coming back next year. It would be a good way to bow out. It didn't come to that, but he still did have a very respectable performance, I would say. My heart goes out to Pierre Gasly. That fantastic qualifying performance, I think he could have netted some points for the team, and they're fighting for that position in the constructors right now, so everything counts. But yeah, he was very upset over the radio when he felt the power going on in the car. We did see the blue smoke, and then when he gets to his box in the pit lane, there was a camera shot that showed pretty much a little hole blown in the back side pod area of the car. So something pretty catastrophically went wrong there. It is really too bad that they weren't even able to capitalize on that qualifying performance.
Yeah, suddenly, because of their amazing result in Brazil a few weeks ago, they are now very, very relevant in all of this championship talk. And, now what they do matters a lot more than it probably used to for them. So this is not good for them, because as we'll look at the points, and this did affect all of that battle for P6. So yeah, it's just one of those things. He was looking early on. I thought he was keeping up with the pace of the runners in front. A bit of a DRS train had formed, but he was a member of it. So I think as long as he was kind of sticking into that, he was able to kind of hold his own. Probably, I think the best he would have been able to do might have been P8, P7, if I'm looking at it realistically from relative pace, but that could have been enough, as it turns out. But yeah, just an unfortunate thing. And Esteban Ocon not really anywhere to really think of in terms of either qualifying or race pace this weekend. So they kind of had to pin their hopes on Gasly, and unfortunately the engine said no more. All right. So I guess any other thoughts in the back markers that you wanted to cover?
Let's see here. Too bad that Alex Albon continued Williams' string of bad luck with having to retire the car halfway through the Grand Prix. I would say pretty weak performance from Liam Lawson this race, especially considering Yuki Tsunoda was able to score points. So he is not confirmed to be in that seat for next season. So if he wants to be confirmed, he needs to do something a little better than what he did here. Stack up a little better against Yuki Tsunoda. I think this is probably his first time racing at this track, though, so maybe he gets the benefit of the doubt for being a novice here. But definitely want to see a little bit better coming from him.
Yeah, I mean there is an iconic pass of, I think it's Magnussen, Lawson, and Perez going three wide down the strip, and Perez actually getting the best of all three of them at one point. So at least Sergio Perez, and we'll talk about where he finished, but he rallied a little bit from his qualifying start. So that was good to see that at least the moves are still there at some point. And that's probably significant, because every time Lawson and Perez get together, it's going to be looked at. It's going to be put under the microscope, and who comes out of what battle better. But yeah, I think this one, It looked like Lawson and a lot of drivers were struggling. I mean, you're gonna look at where everybody finished, and I think you're gonna see some differences simply because of the conditions and the grip level and the dust and not only the dust but the wind apparently had kicked up a lot on race day. So all of those factors, and we've said many times these cars are on a knife edge as it is. It all affected everybody. So it could be one gust that puts you out, or you spin around a corner or something like that. But yeah, so yeah, not the best weekend for Liam Lawson. He does finish on the lead lap, but no points for him. The Aston Martins continue to struggle. It was an odd call, I would say. Well, we'll get to Fernando Alonso. We'll talk about kind of the odd call that what they made strategy wise. Didn't quite understand it. Would have taken a lot of circumstances to have it work, and none of that happened. So I guess we'll move into the midfield now, and we will start with P12, and that's Kevin Magnussen in the Haas. P11, the aforementioned Fernando Alonso. That's where he finishes, but no points for Aston on the weekend. P10 does make up, at least for the Q1 exit, a little bit to get a point. That would be Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. P9, Yuki Tsunoda in the other V-Carb, scoring a couple points for them, so that is very significant. They are all in that big fight for P6 in the Constructors. P8, Nico Hulkenberg. Haas retake that sixth position in the Constructors due to that effort there. P7 and P6, you find the two McLarens. That was Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, respectively. That's pretty much where they qualified. That's pretty much where they finished. That was pretty much the top end. Not a good track. Did not suit the car for them. We'll talk about that. But because Lando finished behind the fifth place finisher of Max Verstappen, that enables Max to secure the fourth Drivers' World Championship. It's a 63-point gap. There are not more than 63 points available at this stage. So no matter what Lando does, Max is champion. And P4, the not so happy Charles Leclerc. We will have to talk about some post-race radio. It's a Ferrari, not exactly a happy home right now. Let's put it that way. Some things to sort out, I think, for sure. All right, Cody, where do you want to go in the midfield here?
First item of business for me is Max Verstappen, 4-time consecutive world champion. Stacks him up against many of the greats. Sebastian Vettel from Red Bull, 4-time consecutive champion. Lewis Hamilton had a run of 4 consecutive championships, and then Michael Schumacher is the only person who's ever made it to 5. So he is definitely stacking up for a franchise of success, as they described it during his post-race interview. But yeah, very excited to see him do this. He is my favorite driver on the grid right now. And I think we'll get to this probably for our season predictions next year. I think he does have a good shot of being the second 5-time consecutive champion. We'll have to see where the car is next year, but for now he can soak in the success. It was hard fought this year, much harder than he had to fight last year, and I think that just goes to show that he's got what it takes, even under pressure. And we did see him buckling a little bit here and there during some of his more questionable maneuvers or outright, scary maneuvers against Lando Norris, like we saw in Mexico City. But he's managed to do it, and nobody can take it away from him now. He is Lando Norris. He didn't perform particularly well in this race. He was trying to fight for a podium for a little while there, but the Ferraris were catching him so quickly, I didn't think it was going to happen. He pretty much let Hamilton go by, which I think caused everyone to breathe a big sigh of relief when that happened, because it could have, it's been messy between the two of them in the past. And he did try to hold up the Ferraris for a little while, but probably saw the writing on the wall and that he didn't need to actually keep them behind to secure the championship. It did end up being, I would say, a pretty disappointing weekend for McLaren. They're still well in the lead for the constructors, but they did lose, I think, 12 points on their lead against Ferrari. So they're only, we'll get into it in the points, but I think only 24 clear. That is definitely something that can be covered in 2 races. So here's to hoping that they're able to bounce back. in Qatar and Abu Dhabi and secure this Constructors Championship, because we know that Ferrari wants it just as bad. And I think they've got just as good a chance at this point. They've been performing very well lately. They did get a driver on the podium this time out. It was not Charles Leclerc, though. And I think Charles made it very clear that he was not happy about that. He let fly a whole lot of F-bombs on the radio there at the end. So if they're going to find anybody again, they're going to find him for that. I think they bleeped out all of it. I don't even think they showed it on the regular broadcast, because they probably would have bleeped out so much of it you wouldn't know what was going on. But yeah, not happy. It seems that there was some kind of discussion between him, Carlos Sainz, and the team as to what they were going to do in this race for who's going to finish where, under what conditions. Maybe they had some kind of agreement that they weren't going to duke it out on track, unless somebody was losing the tires, which did happen. Leclerc lost his tires pretty quick. He was trying to bring the battle to George Russell in the beginning. His tires fell off very quickly. I believe Carlos Sainz ended up going by him at that point. But I think the anger comes from later in the race, where Carlos Sainz didn't want to let Charles Leclerc back by. And went so far as to tell the team that maybe they should ask Carlos in Spanish, which I thought was a pretty nasty dig. But yeah, he seems to be out of patience. Not feeling like Carlos Sainz is the team player that he should be. Carlos has nothing to lose at this point. He's out of the team at the end of this year, and he's probably just gunning for everything he can get at this point, because the podium that he gets now, let's be real, he's not going to get a podium unless
Going to be a minute.
Miracle. Yeah, he's not going to get any podiums driving for Williams unless there's a miracle. So he's got to bask in having the good car while he can, and I think that means he's got no incentive to play nice. For him, it doesn't matter whether he's in front of Charles or Charles is in front of him. It's going to be, if they're finishing consecutively, it's going to be the same number of points for the team. So why not fight for it?
Yeah. So a lot to unpack, I think, for me in the midfield. I mean, I'll start with the two McLarens. And honestly, from my perspective, from being the huge fan of them that I am, I'm just happy that this race is over, because last year I know was really bad. And I knew it was not a good omen when Oscar on his initial outlap just goes, "Oi, the grip is really bad." And that does not suit the McLaren car at all. And as well as they tried to dial it in, it looked like they kind of peaked first of all of the big heavy hitters, and they couldn't really get beyond the 133 range in either free practice 3 or in qualifying. So they were able to hang for a while, but once the track ramped up and everybody kind of really hung it out and went, pushed that little extra bit more, they just didn't have a response in qualifying pace. And apparently in race pace, it wasn't until really very late in the race, after I think Lando was down to max, I think to the tune of like 12, 11 seconds, that they started just throwing all sorts of weird setup, whatever setup you could change in terms of diff settings, they started throwing it at the car, and they found something very, very late, because all of a sudden Lando starts setting green sectors, and I'm like, where was all of this? And the tires are old, and it doesn't seem to make any sense to me. So they found something. They found it too late. So, but at that point, it was pretty much already over. The game was over. There wasn't anything really to do. From my perspective, this was definitely damage limitation, because if it wasn't for I think the heroics of Mercedes, this constructors thing could be a lot more spicy than it even is. So I'll say minus 12. Like, I even came into race day after qualifying and I said, if they can limit it to 10, I think that's really good. They lost 12. So I'm okay. You got out of here. You finished the race with both cars. You didn't do that last year. And you got through a track that just apparently does not jive with your car. So I'll take it. Lando didn't have anything really for Max other than maybe the first turn. He tried to send the move and I think the inside, because he was starting on the inside, and Max kind of shut the door, and that was kind of the end of it. But it wasn't really no bad behavior by Max or anything like that. It was clean all the way, so no issues there. In terms of Max, I thought he had himself, I think, probably the best race he could have, given where the car was. Again, he didn't have the great downforce or the ability to switch on the tires as well as the Ferraris or for certainly the Mercedes. And when Max doesn't think he's got a shot at a win, he'll let Hamilton go in a situation like that. He's done that before. He's even done that with Lando in Singapore. There really wasn't any shot. He kind of realized it, and he just took the best shot he could, and that's where he needed to be. Did fight a little bit with the Ferraris. There is a Constructors' Championship implication there. He did ask the team, what should I do? And they told him, well, you can fight a little bit, but he wasn't going to put the car in any sort of harm's way or anything like that. I would have been shocked if he starts fighting Leclerc like tooth and nail for fourth place. There was no reason for him to do that. He did make the Ferraris have to make a move on him, which they both did, and eventually both got past. But the spicy part is, I think, in the Ferrari camp, because I've got a snippet of the post-race radio from one Charles Leclerc, and it reads as follows. And his engineer comes on and says, "Charles, you did your job." And his response was, "Yeah, I did my job, but being nice fucks me over all the fucking time. It's not even being nice. It's just being respectful. I know I need to shut up, but at one point it's always the same." So, and then I think the engineer comes on and basically tells him to stop talking.
No more, please. No more.
Yes. No more comms, please. So, yeah, a little bit of high drama in Mercedes camp. And I think if you're Leclerc, you're going to have to expect to get more of it next year, because Lewis is a big guy. He's not going to come in and try to acquiesce in any sort of the way. He's in it to try to win the championship. This is kind of his last shot at doing so. So, if you don't sort this stuff out now, now I look at Fred Vasseur and say, okay, you got to sort this stuff out. You got to sort it out quick, because if this becomes a thing going in the last two races, they legitimately do have a shot at the Constructors' Championship. So let's see kind of where that ends up going. But I didn't see, other than the weird pit stop thing with Sainz, and we'll talk about that, anything really. I didn't see the team drama order, but I didn't know all the communication necessarily beforehand. All right, so we will move into that podium, and the aforementioned podium saw Carlos Sainz come home in P3 for Ferrari, and P2 and P1 rallying from P10 on the grid to finish P2. Lewis Hamilton only 7 seconds adrift at the end, and I think we finally saw where the limit of the tires really were with Lewis, because he got to at one point within 4 seconds, and then it just kind of died out for him. But a very lonely race at the front, I would say, for one George Russell. He converts the pole position all the way to the race win. A dominant drive for him if there ever was one. This one counted. There were no post-race malfeasance or investigations or weirdness or anything. So George Russell now officially gets his third win in his career. Congrats to him on opening and closing the show.
A very, very good drive from George Russell. He seemed in control throughout the entire weekend. Very strong during practice. Obviously, took pole position, led off the line, and had to fight Charles Leclerc off a little bit there. But once the tires fell off for Charles, he pretty much took off down the road and built up a really good gap, and was able to, when you get that far in front, all you have to do is control the pace, keep the tires good. I think the commentators were going maybe a little overboard for drama getting late in the race, because Lewis Hamilton did a fantastic job of recovering from his 10th place start, placing through the field, getting up to P2. And he was catching George for a lot of that last stint. And the commentators were kind of drumming it up like, oh, like we might see like a fight for the win on our hands here yet. I didn't really think for a minute that was going to happen. I figured that they were just trying to make it dramatic, and in actuality, George was probably just managing his pace, whereas Lewis was driving the tires off that car, trying to catch up. And there did come a point there in the last few laps where the gap got down to about 4 seconds, and George's engineer came over the radio and said, "Okay, it's time to pick up the pace." And that was pretty much where the gap stopped closing. I think George even opened it back up a little bit. So I figured that yeah, George was just holding back, saving his tires for when he needed them, and it was pretty much going to be in control of that, no matter what. Even if Lewis did manage to get closer into DRS range, his tires would have been like completely shot at that point, and it would have been, I think, fairly easy for George to pull off a defensive maneuver or talk the team into being like, "Hey, I don't think he's got it. Let him pass me." Just hold position or something. And it didn't even come to that. So
Right.
great performance from both of them. Again, from what I said before earlier on in the show, it does make you wonder what could have been for the on-track spectacle if they had locked out the front row, because I think George and Lewis could have really made it like a great fight for the win. But it was not to be this time out. But they still get to have the happy success of the 1-2 finish, something that they've really needed this year. Their times being the strongest car have been few and far between, but when they are the strongest car, they are really, really strong this year. So hopefully they can figure out something to make that car more consistent for next year, and then we'll see maybe like a real four-way fight here, which would be just the coolest thing.
Yeah, apparently it's cold, windy, wet, and or dusty conditions. Mercedes are there to play. Hello, how you doing? And it's such a narrow window, and I don't know that I've seen it that much of a disparity between when they're good versus when they're not, because we've seen them be on the back of the big four, and obviously now we've seen them be in the front of the big four. I mean, Canada, they were really good. In Great Britain, where it was cool and wet and tricky conditions, they were really freaking good there too. And here they are again. And Spa, okay, wasn't wet or anything, but that was a cooler race than what you would have normally expected for that time on the calendar. So yeah, I mean, it's just a very narrow working window. They honestly kept saying, we don't know why necessarily we're good here, but we'll take it and we'll run with it. And from the first turn of the wheel in practice to the end of the race, especially the Russell side of it, and Hamilton was right there in terms of all the practices and all the way up through, except for the one mistake in the last lap in Q3. They were both right there. So whatever the magical formula is, if Toto Wolff could bottle it and ship it to Qatar, he would love to do so. I think it's going to be more like a genie in a bottle. You rub it and it's not going to work. But, you turn the heat up or the tire temperature up. And I have my own theory about this racetrack because of the weird conditions. And I think it suits cars in general that I have what I would consider stupid downforce. All these cars generate a ton of downforce, but how efficient is that downforce? And on a track that is cold, dusty, not a lot of grip, getting the tires into the operating range is so key and so important that if you have excess downforce that in any other place might hinder you because you're washing the car away and you're putting it so hard down that you're going through your tires a lot quicker, which is apparently is what happens in Mercedes. Well, here, because of these conditions, now they're in their window. It's just like when we see when it goes from wet to dry. All of these cars at some point find their sweet spot in that. Either when it's really wet or when it's slightly drying or when it's about to go from inters to slicks. Somebody always seems to find their pace, and you see that disparity amongst the different teams. So it was fascinating kind of from an engineering perspective, I would say, to watch, just kind of to see kind of how that worked. But that's my own term. I'm not trying to say that they engineered a bad car. They didn't. They engineered obviously a really darn good car, especially here because they were great this weekend.
Last little bit before we move on. Sainz did have a very strong race despite any internal arguments between him and Charles Leclerc on how things went. And you could make the argument that it really shouldn't have even been as close a battle at some points as it should have been. The team did Carlos a little bit of a disservice at one point in the race where Carlos said, "Hey, I think it's time to pit. Tires are going away. Really want to do this." And he apparently thought the team was on board with that. He's following Lewis Hamilton, I believe it was, into the pits. And all of a sudden, he shoots back out of the pits at the last minute, crossing over the white lines that lead you into the pits. And they broadcast the radio a little later that said, Carlos is asking what happened. And the team said, "We weren't ready for you." So, Ferrari dropping the ball a bit there. Can't imagine how long they're sitting right there. Like, how long can it take you to get the tires ready and get out there? But you're supposed to be ready at the drop of a hat, and they weren't. But it did kind of bring into the question the legality of his move there, because he was looking like he was committed to coming into the pits. He was slowed down. He was in the lines guiding into the pit lane, and then he shot back out. And when I saw him do that, I thought, oh no, that's going to be a penalty or something. And it wasn't even noted. So apparently I misunderstood the rules there. I know there was some discussion I was seeing on social media about comparison to when Lewis Hamilton got a penalty a bunch of years ago for cutting into the pit lane at the last minute after he had gotten damage to his car. I think it was Germany 2019, right before or right after kind of like the pit lane.
And that's one of the more famous radio messages. That's where the engineer is going in, out.
But in that case, he drove into the pit lane after Ballard. That is supposed to be like the, your last chance to get in, and so that was the penalty in that case. I guess, Carlos Sainz didn't cut out, after that Ballard. So I guess maybe it's legal. It didn't really look legal, especially since he was already way slowed down, but got away with it at the very least.
Yeah, and the adjudication of it actually only turned out to be a deleted lap time. That was actually the official race director's determination, was he went outside the track limits and therefore loses the lap time. And since he had not gotten 3 strikes, he did not get either a black and white flag or any sort of a time penalty for that. This was Rui Marquez's first race, we have to mention that, as the race director. And it was kind of an interesting call. But as you say, Cody, there was really no, like, the NASCAR term would be a commit cone, where, like, if you are to the right of the cone or to the left of the cone, depending on where the pit lane is, you are committed, to going in once you pass that. One of the things that actually did get brought up in the course of the weekend was how light the lines, because again, this is Las Vegas Strip, it's a street track, how light the painted lines for the pit lane really were, because they were trying to make it so that, it could go back to regular traffic and you just pour some paint thinner or something on it, to erase the line, and you go back to, your normal service resumed every night. So it was basically not as thick even of a line as you would normally expect to see. And I know there were several drivers that did question what they were going to do about it, and I'm not exactly sure entirely what they did. I think they made it a little bit brighter, but that was really about it. So in those two situations, I guess that's how he if he got away with anything, that's how he got away with it. I was surprised not to see an investigation. I was surprised not to see a noted or anything, but there was definitely a quicker adjudication of stuff that did happen. And it wasn't like the race director wasn't sticking to the letter of the law and the rules, because, ask Oscar Piastri, lined up apparently not quite right in the grid and got himself a 5-second penalty for that, which he served during the pit stop. So, and it ultimately probably didn't affect where he finished. I think he probably finishes P7 regardless. But it was just kind of an interesting take. Not necessarily something I don't know that I agree or disagree, but I guess if that's how you set it up, then that's how you set it up. All right. So that concludes the Viva Las Vegas portion of the weekend. Our race is now in the books. We are going to take a break. We are going to re-rack. We will come back and we will tell you what this did to the driver's standings as they are after this round. And we'll look at the constructors, which is definitely where the spice of these last 2 rounds are going to be. So you won't want to miss it. Then we'll open it up to your reactions on what you saw this weekend, the fan email segment. We've got our normal contributors on tap, and we're ready to react to them. We'll hand out some awards. We will breeze through the prediction results because there's not a whole lot of points that either of us got because our podium got all screwed up with the Mercedes dominance. And then we'll preview a little bit of Qatar. So come on back and we'll get into all of it.